Call the Germantown School District Board of Education meeting to order July 22nd at 7:01 p.m. We stand, if you're able, for the Pledge of Allegiance, a moment of silence.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
One A, official meeting notice, Dr. Reuter.
Public notice of all meetings has been given by communication from the superintendent's office to the public, to those news media who have requested such notices, and to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, Northwest Now, Express News, and West Bend Daily News. Public notice has also been posted in schools throughout the district and on the Germantown School District website.
1B, roll call, Mr. Barney.
Ewert.
Here.
Brown.
Present.
Barney is here. Loth is absent excused. Medved.
Here.
Pollack.
Here.
Higginbotham.
Here.
Item 2, approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Mr. Barney with the motion, Ms. Higginbotham with the second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes. 3, reports. 3A, District Administrator update, Dr. Chris Reuter.
Thank you. Good evening. We have finished another school year. Summer school ended last Friday. At the conclusion of that, I was able to be there a few days. Mr. Miziak was there almost every day. Mrs. Cole was there as a principal some of the time, and we had a lot of kids engaged in a lot of great activities throughout the summer. Mr. Miziak will provide a comprehensive report, I believe, in September, sharing the results, total enrollment, total staff, and hopefully a financial outlook on how we did from a summer school standpoint. And we'll also share some of the things that were minor tweaks to scheduling and those type of things that worked out. But every time I went over there in the morning, there were kids out in the front of Kennedy enjoying, as well as kids in the classroom, adults engaging with them. So we're on to our next school year, which is the academic year coming up in 5.5 weeks, I think. So I'm sweating a little bit. Also, since we last met, July 1 started a contract for all of our new administrators. Mrs. Cole's here tonight in her new capacity. Welcome as Director of Pupil Service. And all 4 of our new principals, Dave Smith at the high school, Lindsay Chandelier at Amy Bell, and Kelly Schultz at County Line, have begun working in their new roles, meeting with staff, and transitioning. We put together as a director team transition plans for each of the new administrators and how we can support them over the course of the summer into the fall, and those plans have already fully engaged and raring to go. We currently do have 1 administrative opening left, our high school principal position that was vacated by Dave Smith moving to the principal. And we've done a few rounds of interviews. We're looking for the right fit for that person, and I believe that later this week we have a couple more interviews scheduled. So our goal is to then bring someone to the board, either prior to our August meeting or August meeting, depending upon how that timeline falls.
For the assistant principal.
For the assistant principal, yes. As well as you'll hear from Mr. Nowak tonight, Mr. Brown from the personnel committee. We're almost fully staffed, and we're looking good. We have a few vacancies open, but we'll hear more through personnel report. Then we have some guests this evening. We have Ms. Jill North here from Destination Imagination, and some of our students that will be coming up shortly to share the great things that are happening in that programming as well. So, and then Steve Krecklau is here this evening too from the village to share some TID updates with what's going on in the village. So we have a jam-packed July board meeting.
Fantastic. With that, 3B, Destination Imagination update, Jill North. Welcome.
Thanks. So I'm going to stand to the side like this because in Destination Imagination, we never have our backs to the audience. So hence. So research says that you're 25 times more likely to share something negative than positive. Well, I'm going to go against the odds and share something positive this evening. So I'm here actually on the behalf of Mary Bykowski, who is the district coordinator for DI, but she's on her, I'll call it DI from now on instead of Destination Imagination because that's a mouthful. And she's up north on her summer like R&R trip. but she wanted me to share one thing, and she said that people stop me all the time in stores and on the street to thank me for having Destination Imagination in Germantown and in the state. And the kids who have done DI attribute their present success to being a participant. And I will echo that because I have 3 daughters that went through the program. They're all adults now. No one lives in my basement, and they all have good jobs, make money, and are successful. Okay, and certainly I attribute the program to part of that. So I'm here to thank you as the board and school district for continuing to support Destination Imagination. That is, we want to see it always continue because I'm passionate about it. I'm still here. My kids are way out of the program. So the impact of it is that there are 30,000 kids that are involved in DI, and it's in 40 states. Wisconsin was second as a contingent at Globals the last 2 years, and Texas is the first. Okay. And of that second, Germantown was 25% of those teams. So we have a big presence, okay, and we want to continue that. It's also in 6 Canadian provinces and 27 countries. So, well, I guess I really don't have to say this, but raise both your hands if you're here for DI. It's pretty obvious because I swear some of your DI t-shirts up here, yes. So the district last year had 13 teams and 8 qualified to go to Globals. And it is the only program that is at every school for all age groups. That is 2nd grade to 12th grade. It includes boys and girls on a team that have up to 7 kids. And you compete at like elementary level, middle school level, or high school level. And there is actually a university level, but there aren't a lot of participants in that. It's not as strong. So just to kind of give you, I mean, I think some of you are familiar with DI, but I'll do just a slight review. So what they do is they solve a long-term challenge that they work on for months. And they do it in form of a skit that has certain like parameters that they have to follow. And the kids get to choose which challenge that they want to do. There's the fine arts one, there's the technical one, there's a scientific one, there's an engineering one, there's an improv one, and there's a community service, and then they have a specific challenge for like 2nd graders, okay? Then the other part of the competition is doing an instant challenge where the kids go in a room with their team manager, but the team manager doesn't help them, and then they have to solve something they have no idea what it is until they walk in the room. And I'll give you an example of, how many of you remember the Apollo 13 movie? Yeah, someone, you know, yeah. So the astronauts were in space, okay? They were stuck up there. So they put the engineers in a room with the stuff they had in space, and they said, get them down. So that is a real live instant challenge that the kids actually train for in this program. And then Germantown competes well on the regional level. If you place at that, you go to state, and the district funds up to that point, so thank you. Then for global level, the teams fundraise. I mean, there was, I will say many decades ago, where that was part of district funding, but then again, the district didn't fund any other entity that went outside the state, so in all fairness, I mean, that was fine, okay, yeah. It's a program that teaches the 21st century. We call it STEAM because we put the A in it instead of STEM. And it has kids where they can really empower themselves. And it's all about like what they can do with what they have, okay? And they have to do everything themselves. The coach, team manager cannot be hands-on. You can teach a student how to solder or how to weld, but you can't do it for them when they construct what they're doing. Okay, they all have to do it on their own. So employers want these days kids that are critical thinkers, creative problem solvers, project managers, can time manage, money manage, and that's what this program does for all these kids here. Now I will say as an adult, I've been involved in this for more than 25
everyone. My name is Maddie Cull, and I'm really excited to talk about Destination Imagination and how much it has helped me grow as a person. I've been a part of DI since 2017, and this program has been a huge part of my life. I've learned so much from it. Destination Imagination has taught me the importance of teamwork. Working with my team on different challenges has shown me how to communicate better, respect everyone's idea, and use our individual strengths to accomplish a common goal. These skills have made me a better person. DI has also pushed me to think outside of the box and to solve problems creatively. We have faced some tough challenges, and I have learned that it's okay to fail because it's all part of the learning process. This mindset has made me more confident and determined in everything I do. One of the biggest things DI has helped me with is overcoming my fear of talking in front of other people. Before DI, I used to get really nervous speaking in front of a crowd, but through presenting our challenges and working with my team, I have gained so much confidence. Now I feel much more comfortable and self-assured when I have to speak publicly. You may not know this, but Germantown has a reputation for having strong DI teams, and other schools look at us and what we are doing to solve the challenges. One of the most amazing experiences I've had with Destination Imagination was going to Globals. Meeting people from all over the world like Ukraine, Poland, China, Mexico, and the Cayman Islands was incredible. It has shown me how diverse and connected our world is, and I have made many friendships and memories along the way. Destination Imagination has made me more curious and eager to learn new things. It's encouraged me to step outside of my comfort zone and to try new things and experiences. The creativity and excitement I have found in DI has inspired me to keep exploring and growing. Destination Imagination has been an amazing journey. It's given me valuable skills, a positive outlook, and a love for learning that will carry with me forever. I'm really thankful for everything I've gained from this program and the awesome memories I have made with my team. Please continue to support Destination Imagination so that other students can have these incredible opportunities. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. To add on to that, I'd probably say if somebody asked me just what is DI, how do I like DI, I just say it's a fun club to hang out with friends. But if you ask me on a deeper level, I've learned so many core skills through my DI years. I think I've been 3-4 years, but I've learned so many communication skills. I was really struggling with teamwork, and I've learned just how to be creative in my life. And it's really impacted me getting connections. And not only have I made really good connections and friends throughout the years, but I've made friends and connections globally, and I've met so many great people. And that's what I have to say. So thank you guys for listening.
Thank you for sharing.
I knew Maddie when she was at Indy Bell in 3rd grade, and she was such a shy girl. Oh my gosh. And then years go by, and I see her, and I'm like, oh my God, it warmed my heart to see how she had grown, not just physically, but just as she said, there was no way before you could have done that. Yeah, exactly. And granted, she's got some years on her also. So, but does anyone else want to share anything? Yeah. So Carmen Wesser has been a team manager for many years since elementary, and now she's at the high school level. And I will say the team that she managed this year had a walk on stage on Globals, and you got 3rd place. So in the world.
And a lot of cheers. I didn't plan anything, but I will tell you a couple of things about my journey with DI. So when I came about 8 years ago, moved from Menominee Falls, and I'll tell you, I loved the Falls School District. I was a little hesitant to move into Germantown, not that it wasn't a good school district, but I just had such a strong rapport with the Falls.
I do remember that.
You remember that, yeah. And so then I met so we went, and then I worked at Durko Aerospace. I don't know if any of you know that, but there I had a lot of people that lived in Germantown, and they told me about, there's this great program called Destination Imagination, and I'm like, all right, whatever. Well, Jill, of course, organized it and went to Amy Bell, and Jill had, my middle daughter decided she wanted to do this. So, okay, I went, and I forget who was her coach, and that year we went, and I watched it, and I'm like, these guys are kind of weird. I don't know if you've ever gone to this place and watched it, but I'm like, okay, this is a very odd
year, my younger daughter wanted to get into it, there weren't enough coaches, and I thought to myself, well, how hard could it be to be a coach? Well, I have a whole newfound respect for teachers and coaches and all kinds of things like that now. I work in ERP, I do a lot of project management, I do a lot of software, I'm in charge of purchasing, and I can tell you that this is by far the best schooling I've ever seen for kids. So I would not only encourage you, I think the reason I came to Germantown was to give me the opportunity to have DI and learn about DI. It is project-based. These kids learn so many skills that I am going to tell you right now, if you look at it, you should actually put more money into it. You should look and see what Texas does. They make it an elective, because it is amazing how much these kids learn. So I guess I wanted to tell you that I'm thankful that you had it. I'm thankful I came to Germantown. I love the school district now. I feel just the same way. I tried to go back to Menominee Falls and get them engaged in it. They didn't take it up. So guess what? They're lost. We rock, right? Yeah. So I guess that if you haven't been to one of them, if you haven't looked at it, I would encourage you to go out, look at what really takes to go into this. These kids work, I think 3 days a week, I'd say easily, for 7 months. It is a huge time commitment, but if you watch them in the instant challenges, if you watch the brain power that they're using, this is real world. This is what's going to take you to the next level. So I would encourage you all to keep funding it. Thank you for your time, and don't be afraid to put a little bit more. Make it an elective. Thank you.
And yes, as we all know, the kids are our future, and if we don't give them the skills that they need, yeah, globe won't be the same. So, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and presenting. I think this board has supported the program and will continue to support the program. I don't, obviously it's fantastic to hear the experiences. You know, anytime we can shrink the world and bring it to Germantown and expand our borders and really push our kids' critical thinking skills to the max, that's how we continue to grow them exponentially. So thank you guys for all your work you do and the participation.
I just like to add, I concur with everything that everyone said. One of my sons was in DI, and when he was in elementary, he was described as painfully shy. And after a year of DI, he completely came out of his shell and was a different kid from then on. If you met him today, you would never see a shy child that, you know, in elementary school was like that. He's completely outgoing. He's an entrepreneur. He's on stage all the time. He does all of those things. He's very successful in what he wants to do. So I encourage any family that has any interest to get into it, and any child, even if you're nervous about it, do it. You're going to get some unbelievable experiences. I agree. Thank you, Jill.
Is that your son, Brandon?
Brandon, of course.
But I'll just say one thing. It's not only just about being shy. It's, I mean, we still have shyer people on our team, right? But I think it's about the cohesiveness and the fact that there's so many different levels of a team. It's not just one person. I mean, you have one that's an idea generator. You have, and so it really truly is applicable to the real world, at least from a business sense. I don't know about everything else, but everything I've dealt with it.
Well, it's true. It's like real world in that they all have different skill sets
Yes.
that they bring to the plate.
Yes.
And it's
That's-
okay to be shy because that person might be the builder, and then the other
Or
one
the
is
idea
the
generator or the whatever,
And that's
so-
what the real world is.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. We'll move on. 3C Tax Incremental District Update. District Administrator Steve Kreckles here to help walk us through this.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I don't think this will be quite as interesting or as Destination Imagination.
We
but-
always put you after the students.
Yeah.
It's testing our critical thinking.
But there is some updates that the superintendent has invited me to share with the board here this evening. I sent over for the packet a couple of documents that I'll go through fairly briefly, and then I have one other one that I brought along in hard copy to pass out. The first is a PowerPoint presentation. Ehlers is the village's financial advisor, and they made this presentation to the village board on July 1st about the proposed tax increment district amendment. And I'll start out with this. I won't go through in as much detail as they did, but please, if you do have questions or want any more specifics, please jump in and let me know. First of all, just a little bit of background on Tax Increment District 9. That was a district that was formed a couple of years ago. And it focuses around the village's new Department of Public Works facility that'll house all of those operations, and it was formed in primarily as a financial tool to help fund some of the infrastructure improvements that were necessary for the Public Works facility without having to put those on the property tax rolls. So, for example, if you look at the road work that's being done on Donjas Bay Road right now, hopefully none of you have to use that or aren't too inconvenienced because it is closed at this point, but that road construction is being funded through the tax increment district. So instead of issuing levy-supported bonds that have to be paid back through the property taxes, that road work is being done and paid for, in essence, by the private sector development that's in that area. There was one previous amendment to TID 9. It started, the village's approach to tax increment districts is to generally draw the borders small and only include parcels that need to be included in those tax increment districts. And then, if necessary, it is possible to go through this process to amend them. And in that case, actually, if we go to the next slide real briefly, the parcels on the lower, I guess we're all, I can't say left or right, can I? I guess it's the lower left-hand corner.
Yeah, they're numbered, so.
Yeah, it would be.
362-999.
Yeah, 2999 and 966001 were added, and that is, that was land that was purchased by Stonecast. They're a local Germantown company that produces concrete panels, and they've made some improvements there and are utilizing that. So adding those parcels increases the revenue that the TID is bringing in and shortens the length of time that the TID needs to be kept in place. So that was added a couple of years ago. Let me see, 2-3 months ago, I believe it was in May, we were approached by Sterling Pharmaceuticals. They're a company that is located just north of Donjas Bay Road by Washington Street. You probably may be familiar with their facilities there. They're one of the larger Germantown employers, one of the larger Germantown property taxpayers, and they are looking to expand their facilities to accommodate some increased production. Sterling Pharmaceuticals is a company that's headquartered in Cork, Ireland. The facility in Germantown is one of 5 facilities that they own. There's one in Cork, there's another one in Wales, there's one in North Carolina, I believe, if I remember correctly, one in the Netherlands, and then the Germantown facility. They're looking to expand their production line for some new pharmaceutical products that they are under contract to produce. And as they were going through their internal processes to select which of those 5 facilities would be expanded to produce this new line of pharmaceuticals, one of the things that was looked at was what sort of incentives the units of government were willing to provide in order to encourage the expansion. Economic Development, Washington County, put together a package that is similar to what had been offered in past times to many of the companies that now inhabit the business park that was formerly Tax Increment District 4, which was roughly a 33% revenue share for a period of time with Sterling Pharmaceutical. And what that means is that during this period of time, they would get 33% of basically what they pay in property taxes back in the form of an incentive payment for a period of roughly 10 years or so. It works out to be about a total of $3 million. And a portion of that is in the shape of an upfront loan from Economic Development Washington County. Maybe going up to the next slide here. These next few slides kind of walk through the math that Ayler has prepared for us and just work out whether or not the cash flow works for the tax increment district. And in this chart, the most important things you can see in the rectangular boxes across the top of the table are the different expansions that would take place. There's an initial expansion, which construction would expect to be started towards the end of this year if the project goes through. There's a campus expansion that would follow a year or two later, a lab expansion within their current building, and then Base 6 expansion and carryover that would take place some point 3 or 4 years down the road. And the estimated values, property values that would be added to the increment or to the incremental district in each one of those phases is listed out here. It works out to be a total of $42 million. And I will say that Aylers, when they take these approaches, as they should, take a very conservative approach. Generally what we see in practice is that those values turn out to be significantly higher. So, but that was the assumption that went in. And then on the next slide, that shows the revenue that would come into the incremental district from each one of those phases. When the total added up here, it's about 4.2 million in total from all 5 phases. And then at the end, when the tax increment district is closed, then that revenue stream would then be allocated back out to the taxing jurisdictions. The next slide here is a much busier table and kind of an eye chart, but I think what's most important, if you look over on the right-hand column, you'll see a box shaded in green. And what that indicates, that this table calculates the estimated time when the tax increment district would be able to close. And you'll see that here they show that it'll have collected enough revenue to be able to close in the year 237. And the current TID9 closure date is 2042. So that takes 5 years off of the necessary life expectancy of the tax increment district. So so doing this going forward with this project would facilitate the Sterling Pharmaceutical expansion. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, the benefits of that to the community, and would also shorten the time that TID9 would have to be open, accelerate its closure. And then the final slide, this one is actually out of date. We have had some changes to the schedule. There is another handout that shows a more detailed timeline. But instead of going through that detailed timeline, I'll just real quickly indicate that we're now planning the initial Joint Review Board meeting in early September, probably around September 9th. We need to make sure we have a quorum available. And then that would put this on the Village Board meeting of September 16th, with then final approval looking at late September. So just about a month later than the timeline that was laid out on this presentation. I think there was also a map that is in the packet that looks like this. This shows what the new TID9 boundaries would look like. There would be 3 parcels that would be added, shaded in what is that? Is that light green or light blue? My wife's not here to tell me.
Teal.
Teal. Okay. If it's not in the box of 8 crayons, I struggle. So But in the teal shading here is the area being added in. There are two parcels north of Donges Bay Road. 254-973 is the current Sterling Pharma location. And they would be expanding on that property, as well as one of the future phases could include 254-975. So that's where we expect to see the growth.
They own that?
They don't own that
975.
right now.
Who owns
It's something that they're looking at as a potential future phase.
Who owns that?
I don't recall the name of the company.
A business does, not a private citizen.
It's not a private, it is a business property.
Okay.
And then to the south, under state law, the borders of a tax increment district have to be contiguous. So in order to connect this to the remainder of tax increment district 9, we had to add 361-976. That's currently owned by GFL. They have their recycling facility there. I don't expect any significant changes or modifications to their operations. This parcel is simply being added just in order to connect the Sterling Pharmaceutical property with the rest of the tax increment district. The last thing I'll say about the borders is, we did look at other options for approaching this deal. Another alternative would have been to create a standalone tax increment district, tax increment district 10, just around the Sterling Pharmaceutical properties. But the village board liked the alternative that's being presented, since it would shorten the life of TID District 9 and try to achieve the goal of closing the tax increment district out as quickly as possible. And then finally, and I apologize for not having been able to send this over in digital format earlier, but I'm going to pass out a copy of a report that was prepared by Economic Development Washington County on the project and presented to the village board. This shows basically their estimated costs and benefits related to the project. And I'll hit some of the highlights. On the front page, you can see that the project will result in 103 new jobs over the next 5 years. The average salary of the jobs being added would be $52,000 a year. There would be a annual payroll of $9.8 million and a total capital investment of about $76.3 million. And maybe more importantly, and this doesn't come out very clearly in this report, is that this would really secure the foundation of Sterling Pharmaceutical in Germantown. That they were purchased by this other larger multinational company, and adding this function and expanding in Germantown will make them more competitive with other locations, and help to ensure that not only is there this expansion, but also that those jobs and that presence here in Germantown is secured. The second page, it's on the back here, in very small type. I apologize for that. I think a lot of the younger staff maybe try to play little games here that see how strong my reading glasses are. But that just provides some more detail on the structure of the deal that's being done. And then the final page with some charts and graphs shows the cost-benefit analysis from both Washington County, Village, Germantown. The other districts includes the school district, and then the TID 9 itself. And it does show a payback period of about 9.2 years for the investment that the TID would make. And then the final note, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions. I did just want to mention, and this is a item that has come up in some of the village board meetings. Economic Development Washington County is an entity that is basically governed by Washington County. It's a spinoff that promotes economic development, obviously. They are governed by a board of directors that has a representation from the private sector and the public sector. There are at this time, there's no one from the Village of Germantown on the board. Previously, Village President Dean Wolter had served on that. There are representatives from other communities in Washington County. One of the business representatives is Adam Kujath, who is the local manager for Sterling Pharma here in Germantown. We did have the village attorney review this to make sure that there weren't any conflicts or issues, and the board from Economic Development Washington County is not part of the loan approval process. They have a separate group that does review those loans and make those approvals, and Adam is not a part of that particular decision-making process. So in the eyes of the village attorney, there were no conflicts of interest, but I guess in the interest of transparency, we want to make that known to the board.
Appreciate that.
So with that, I know I went through a lot very quickly in the interest of time, but happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I have a few. I'm sure others do. Let me get through a couple of mine here. A couple of us haven't been on the board when this TID was initiated. So if you could kind of walk us through a little bit of that. You gave us some historical context. So June of 2022 is when it was approved.
Yeah.
And we've already seen one expansion since then.
Yes, yeah. The growth in the area has occurred more quickly than I think was anticipated when we initially formed it. If you look at the map that's on the screen right now, initially the TID only included the parcel 361,991 in that, where the cursor is pointed right now.
That's 361,978.
978? No. Okay. Oh, I apologize.
Not on there.
Sorry, there's a different number on a different sheet here. But yes, that it was initially just around that parcel.
Okay.
And again, if you're familiar with that area, you've seen that the developer was F Street, the construction management company was Keller. Another local firm constructed a 350,000 square foot light industrial building on that location. We amended it shortly after it was created because we learned shortly afterwards that Stonecast was buying the other parcels to the west of the DPW site and making some improvements there. And the idea was to capture the increment from those improvements again in order to shorten the life of the tax increment district. So this third amendment or second amendment would be to accomplish the same goal, capturing the growth from Sterling Pharmaceutical in order to reduce the life expectancy of the tax increment district by 5 years.
Okay. So that's the reason for the expansion. Did we see that development take place in that secondary expansion?
Yes, Stonecast is in there. They're currently using the site. They've made land improvements, a lot of grading work, lighting. They're using the land as a storage facility and a staging facility for their concrete panels. They may, in the future, this is a little bit more of an unknown, they may add a production facility at that location sometime in the future, but that's not certain.
With the Sterling expansion or potential expansion, the proposal, the numbers, I mean, obviously there's big numbers involved in this, but it's phased, right? So I'm assuming what you gave me on here is if all 4 phases come to fruition?
Yes, yeah, that does, the Economic Development Washington County does include, does assume all.
Do they break it down by phase?
They do not, they do not. They do, Ehlers does, if you go back to the PowerPoint, that chart does break down the expansion by phases. So the initial phase would be the largest. That would be $14.8 million. And then the campus expansion, which would follow shortly afterwards, is about $2.5 million. And again, Ehlers is reducing these values significantly from in order to be conservative with their numbers. The lab expansion within their current building would be about $5 million, and then that final base 6 expansion would be $10 million over probably 2 years.
What's the likelihood of those all occurring?
Fairly certain, and that is something that we're expecting to include in a development agreement with Sterling Pharmaceutical. Typically, when we go through this process and we negotiate development agreements, we include penalties if they don't meet those phases. So if they don't expand according to this timeline and to the extent that they've indicated, they won't get the full amount of the incentives that are outlined.
So then that includes that 42 million you referenced earlier. That would be requisite of all phases being.
Correct.
And then you gave us a 33% number that Sterling Pharma would receive,
Yes.
and that's indicative of $3 million. That's the math on that.
Over the course of the agreement and the tax increment district, it would add up to be, depending upon how you look at discounting the cash flow, but roughly $3 million.
So that, at what point does the village ante into this whole scenario, other than saying we expanded the area?
I'm sorry, what was
What point does the village incur an expense?
There would be there's actually no expense from the village on this. This is structured as, you might hear the phrase in tax increment districts, pay-go structure, where basically the company or the developer or the company in this case only gets something back if the construction takes place. So there's no upfront village expense here. There's no additional infrastructure being put in place. This is, a straightforward, just a simple incentive to Sterling Pharma to do this expansion here in Germantown instead of over in Cork Island or someplace else.
Sure. So if there's no upfront expense, what's the back end expense?
Simply the 33% incentive payment that goes to Sterling Pharmaceutical based on what increments they achieve.
And how long does that go for?
That would go, I just want to see if you can see it on this table here. Let's see. If we go to that table, you can see that the middle shows potential MRO from phase 1, potential MRO from phase 2, from campus 26, and so there's the MRO stands for municipal revenue obligation. So as they complete each one of these phases, then there is an obligation from the village to share a portion of future property tax revenue from that increment. And it would go until that obligation is accrued through 2043. However, what we have done in the past, like for example, TID 4, for those of you who might have been around for a while longer, we accumulate the cash and you actually pay that out, sort of like paying your mortgage off early, and likely close in 2037. So the obligation is calculated out through 2043, the end of the tax increment district, but we would pay that out early in 2037.
So what would theoretically be $3 million of tax revenue coming in to the municipality and its other agencies, right? We would be offloading to Sterling Pharma.
Well, I would say, and it kind of goes into this, one of the questions that has to be analyzed and answered as part of the tax increment district process is called the but-for question. So we have to look at this from a legal perspective and say, would this development occur but for this incentive? And based on the information, the data that we have now, that we've shared with Ehlers, that the village attorney has looked at, the answer to that question is no. So if if the tax increment district was not formed, then the school district, the county, MATC, and the village we'd get 100% of zero right away. We would split that up but there's no increment there. There's no $3 million there. So what the tax increment district does is it does defer when that revenue starts coming in to the other taxing jurisdictions and the village. And in this case, it would be until 2037. And at that time, the TID would be closed, and then the taxing jurisdictions would see that revenue stream.
So, but currently, because there's a TID there, it's not zero, right? It's just less than what would be if this was added?
Well, if this is added, if the Sterling Pharmaceutical parcels are added to TID 9, the amount that Sterling Pharmaceuticals is currently paying in property taxes will continue to go to the taxing jurisdictions as it does right now. So I don't know what that dollar amount is, but say it's $100,000. 60% of that is going to continue to go to the school district. It's only the additional increment on top of that would go to the tax increment district.
But my point is, as the TID's constructed right now, the taxing authorities would get 100% of what that is, as it is right now, minus this expansion.
100% of
the current structure.
Of the current structure,
Yeah.
and that will, yes, that's the case, and that will continue even under this amendment. So the taxing jurisdictions will get 100% of the existing,
So they get 33% of only what they bring to the table as far as development?
only what comes from the expansion.
Okay.
Well, yes.
There's two properties there. I don't know if you can bring that back on. So 254,975.
Yes,
That's the property they don't own,
Correct.
but may potentially own.
correct.
What part of the phases would be included in the purchase of that property?
That would be phase 2. Yeah,
Okay.
and the same thing is true of that parcel. Whatever they're paying in property taxes now continues to go to the taxing jurisdictions as it does.
So what's the rush to add that now until we know they've at least purchased the land for that development?
Theoretically, you could delay, theoretically, it could be added in another amendment. There is a limit to the number of amendments that you can make to a tax increment district. I believe it's 3, so that would limit future flexibility. There's an expense to going through the process. And, there is, as much as you all enjoy, I'm sure you enjoy having me come and make these presentations, I would be back here again.
Anytime the village and us can interface is fantastic.
I think it's good. I enjoy school board meetings.
I'm just wondering, so if they don't expand on that, then we have kind of a vacant property. Is there opportunity for a different company
It would be.
or entity to?
Yeah,
get
it
involved
would
in
be
that?
a different company could come in there. The company that's in there now could expand. And as
But
I
they
men-
wouldn't be subject to this 33% in that development.
They would not. If it's a different company, they would not be subject to that 33%.
We would know the 4 phases aren't happening as soon as that land isn't purchased by Sterling Pharma, right?
I think
Or is that independent of?
they're independent. They're independent.
So 1, 2, 3, and 4 aren't necessarily the order it has to go in?
Well, and my understanding is that their plans for that parcel, as they expand their production, they're gonna need more storage facility. They would prefer to have that site, and I think they will probably end up doing that. There's a lot of advantages to them to keeping that close, but let's say, for example, they're unable to work out a deal with the landowner, they could do that, they could store their supplies, materials, or product at another location. So they could theoretically skip that one and still expand their lab in phase 3 and then expand base 6 at a later date as well.
So the 33%, basically the estimated $3 million,
Mhm.
EDWC is bringing an initial $1 million to this project, correct?
1 million of it will be in the form of a loan from EDWC that'll get paid off as part.
Upfront.
Yeah, and they'll get that cash
Yeah.
up front, and the debt will be paid off by the tax increment district as part of that revenue sharing
So
agreement.
their argument for this is they need that $1 million to entice corporate to bring the business here? Or
It
part of the proposal?
Yeah, the cash flow with an expansion like this, that can be a significant factor for the company when they're making their locational decision.
So then that 33%, 1 million plus interest is paid back to the county?
Correct.
Or the county's organization, EDWC?
Yep.
So they won't receive all 3 million of that. They're technically gonna receive
It-
1 point whatever.
Yes, yeah, and when you get into, again, the 3 million is a rough number.
Yeah, I'm using it because it's
Yeah.
a number and people can
Yeah.
understand the
Yes,
context of the conversation.
But some of that, a small portion of that will go to interest to EDWC, that's correct.
The $1 million plus.
Well,
Or is
the
the $1 million
principal will
forgivable?
they'll get paid back. Sterling Pharma will get the $3 million. So they'll get 1 million up front, and then the rest of it will be paid off over time as a part of that revenue share. A portion of the proceeds from the TID will go to interest for economic development in Washington County. And actually, they won't receive it. The underwriters of the loan, the financial institutions that are loaning the money will receive it.
So that's a confusing way to say they're gonna get 3 million, but they're not gonna keep all of it, cause some of it has to go back to EDWC, right? 1 million plus interest.
They get to keep the $1 million. So Sterling Pharma gets $1 million up front. And then, again, if you look at the chart
so-
that shows the payments,
So my question, I'll
Yeah.
simplify it. My question is, it's not a loan then if they keep the $1 million?
correct. It's a forgivable loan. Sterling Pharma's not paying it back. It's getting paid
So
back.
let's call that 4 million minus they have to pay. Sterling Pharma pays the interest or the TID pays the interest?
The TID pays the interest.
Okay, so we're losing the 3 million plus the interest to EDWC.
I think we're double counting the money. So there's a payment. It's really a timing factor from Sterling Pharma's perspective. They're getting $3 million. They're getting $1 million up front in the form of a loan that
That's forgivable.
that the tax increment district is paying, and it's forgivable if they meet these employment goals. They'll get another $2 million in revenue sharing payments over the course of the tax increment district.
And then the TID also pays the interest of the initial $1 million, not Sterling Pharma.
Right. So you could look at that, that's a benefit to Sterling
Yeah,
Pharma.
I'm looking at money in, money out, so there's
Yeah.
3 million out
Yeah,
plus interest.
plus
to
interest on that
EDWC,
$1 million loan.
Which I'm assuming is, I don't know, what's the percent of the loan?
It would be about $45,500.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry, I read the wrong column there. That's annual, that's the annual interest on the loan the first year. It's about $500,000 in interest. Yeah.
So then we're losing 3.5's out the door on this.
Yeah, and I guess where I think there's maybe a little bit of difference in the way that I would look at it is we're not losing $3.5 million because without the tax increment district, there's no $3.5 million to begin with. The expansion doesn't happen. There's no additional revenue coming in.
There's no possible way that expansion happens without this?
I don't believe so.
Well, we can keep moving. I just wanted to clarify that, because I guess I was confused when I listened to the meeting on the 1st, and the discussion was being had about what 33% is. There wasn't context around dollar amounts, so I'm glad we have that now.
Okay.
And then that percentage, that meeting made it sound like Sterling Pharma was on the hook for the percentage back, but actually the village in the TID is on the hook for the.
Yeah, the village is paying
So
back.
that's the when I say there's no front end for the village, the back end is what we just discussed.
Right.
Okay. And I appreciate you bringing, this was brought to my attention pretty quickly, the board of directors. And that conversation got a little cloudy there in the first, as far as who was representing who and what interests were at hand and being discussed. I think EDWC did most of it. To me, it presented as if it was on the behalf of the village. Actually, they're on behalf of their own interest, spurring this for the county. Sterling Pharma's in it, and we can say that they're not directly tied to the decision, but I would have a hard time thinking someone from the board of directors there who initiated, according to what you were saying, they initiated this conversation of needing this to potentially spur this growth.
Yes, I believe they initially contacted Kristen Cheslak from Economic Development Washington County and said they were looking to do this expansion and but we're competing with other locations and wanted to know
Sure.
what types of partnerships.
I think everyone can understand why you would have that conversation,
Yeah.
right? So is this land, this is locked in?
The borders here?
What we have in front of, because this wasn't presented at the village. They actually had no understanding of what plots, other than Sterling Pharma's, that were gonna be involved. There was some loose conversation that it could potentially be this one, and then they didn't know about surrounding. And that was EDWC's words were saying something along the lines of interest of surrounding properties to Sterling Pharma.
Yeah. This is something that the Joint Review Board will look at and vote on. It is not locked in.
So this could change
This
between
could
now and
change,
approval.
yeah.
Do we see any conversation around that right now?
You know, at this point, there won't be any more conversation until the Plan Commission and the Joint Review Board meet on this topic. I mean, it is open for discussion. These lines were drawn based on the direction from the village board, not only on this TID, but others, to minimize the properties to only those that are necessary. You know, I think, you know, there are other alternatives that could be looked at. You know, there's that square property right next to 361-976, south of Donjas Bay Road, right there. And that is one where, you know, there's no specific development proposals for that property at this point. However, it is an underutilized facility. There are probably some brownfield issues with it, and you know, you could make an argument for adding that to the tax increment district in order to attract some additional development there. And see if there was a package of both TID financing and brownfield money that could be put together to try to make some improvements to that location. There's a kind of sort of triangular shaped properties also south of Donjas Bay Road.
That one?
That is one that could also be added to the tax increment district. However, that one is a residential property at this point. There's a older house on the site, and again, typically the village board doesn't look to add residential properties to TIDs unless the property owner is seeking to become a part of it, and that's not the case here. So you know, I wouldn't go any further to the northwest. You know, largely that area is already developed with, that was part of the old TID 4 that was closed 4 or 5 years ago, and I don't really see a need to add any other properties there. So probably, you know, the two that you could add are the two I just mentioned. Like you mentioned earlier, you can make an argument for not including 254-975 right now. And you know, that would be an option that the Joint Review Board, Plan Commission, and Village Board could consider.
Yeah, I think you provided some pretty good clarification as to why it might be ahead of time. So your understanding is there's only 3 allowed amendments?
I'd have to go back and double check. I know there is a limit. Off the top of my head, I'm gonna say it's 3.
So after this would, most likely is only one more kick at the can?
You know, and normally we don't like to do this many amendments to TIDs. You know, especially this early in their lives, but
Yeah, this is 2 years, right?
yeah. And this is not something that I would say is typical or something that we would normally try to not try to do with TIDs. This one in particular, and you know, I'll say, as we looked at this, you know, we did look at that option of just having a standalone, but and that still is an alternative. That's something, you know, for example, the school board, if you wanted, you could direct your representative to suggest to the joint review board that you create a standalone TID. That would be an alternative that could be considered by the joint review board. The reason the village board didn't go that route is because they wanted to try to close TID 9 earlier, and that's the benefit of going this way.
How many years is that?
It takes 5 years off of TID 9.
And that's 5 years if all the phases happen?
Correct.
And what if only phase 1 happens?
It wouldn't be quite 5 years. We haven't run those calculations, but probably a year and a half, 2 years.
Okay. If phase 1, we're thinking.
If
a year
phase
and a
one
half
were the
to
only
2 years.
phase.
Probably a little bit more than, because percentage wise, that was the biggest financial
Yeah,
commitment, right?
yeah.
I guess I have some questions on TID impacts. So we say there's no cost to the village. How does TID impact the taxpayer?
So if you're talking about the typical residential taxpayer, and actually really anybody, TID has no impact on their particular property tax bill when it's formed. So if we take TID 9, for example, all of the debt that's been taken on by TID 9 for Donges Bay Road, for, it's called Town 9 Road, the new road that goes in by the DPW facility, all of the debt for those TID-funded projects are paid for by the incremental property taxes from the properties within the tax increment district. So there's no impact on those, on other property taxpayers within the village. Sometimes, you know, I think people will raise the question or say, well, but what if these developments went ahead without the tax increment district? But that's one of the questions that we specifically look at is, will this happen without the creation of the tax increment district? So just in more general terms, let's take, for example, TID 8. That's the TID up by, up north of Holy Hill Road. The answer to that is no, that development would not have taken place without the creation of TID 8 because there was no water and sewer serving that area. Every one of those businesses that's been built up there, every one of those buildings requires water and sewer service. And without the TID to extend water and sewer service up to that area, that development would not have taken place. Same thing is true in TID 9. If you look at the new building that went up on the corner of Donges Bay and Wazaki, that building would not be there without water and sewer service, which did not extend that far east before TID 9 was created. And that infrastructure was put in place for that facility. In this case, and it's a little bit less concrete for something like Sterling Pharma, but looking at, and we did look into the other sites that Sterling Pharma does own in other locations, and there are other sites that are capable of this type of expansion. I know that one of them in particular is in Ireland. If you look, Ireland has done a lot to create tax breaks and incentives for the pharmaceutical industry. So that reduces their costs for that location. So in order to be competitive, this was a case where without this incentive, this expansion would not take place here. So that's an important question that gets asked every time a TID is formed, every time there's an amendment to the TID, is would this development take place but for this incentive or this infrastructure investment? And I'm not going to say that that question is answered correctly in every TID, in every jurisdiction in the state.
Sure.
But it is on
I mean,
TIDs.
there's financially disastrous TIDs in this country. I
Well,
mean, I'm not saying these are them,
yeah.
by any
Yep.
means.
And there are,
So-
they do get misused at times. There
Yeah.
are bad decisions that are made, but that's not the case here.
Can I ask a
So-
follow-up to that?
Go ahead.
Forget about whether or not the development would happen or not.
Uh-huh.
If the development does happen without a TID, does the taxpayer benefit?
If the development happens without a TID, yes.
Yes, and how long does it take for that taxpayer to see that benefit?
If it happens without a TID?
Yeah, it's immediate,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Okay, and with the TID, they have to wait for that TID to close.
Right, until the costs that needed to be incurred for that development to take place are
Okay.
paid off.
That's all I need,
Okay.
thank you.
So, I'm struggling a little bit with the cost to taxpayer,
Okay.
that there isn't one. As far as tax levy, what is the TID's impact on the tax levy? How is it calculated?
The tax increment district is included, that levy is included in the Village of Germantown's levy. So when that's levied out, it's calculated and the rate includes the levy portion for the tax increment district.
So then, if the development within the TID, the valuations of those properties raise faster than the external areas of the TID, the external areas of the TID are now on the hook for the internals of that TID, as far as the tax levy, correct?
If the tax levy goes up beyond, if the tax levy goes up and it includes if the general tax levy includes the levy from the tax increment district. In Germantown, the practice of the village board has been, so if you listen to our budget discussions, you'll hear the conversation about the levy limit TID in versus levy limit TID out. And what the village board has done is take that TID levy out so that that doesn't occur. Otherwise, there would be a small impact on property taxpayers in Germantown if the village board didn't do that.
So if you use the numbers that are current, there's no, they're saying it's neutral?
Correct. The way the village of Germantown has used the tax increment districts, there's no impact on residential property taxpayers.
I don't believe that to be factually true.
Okay.
Chris, I don't know if you can pull that up for me. So I did that math based off of the filings of the village, and there's actually a $397 a year increase in the tax bill for a $425,000 property. In the years prior to this is 2023. So if I did it for the last 3 years, and it's corresponding with what I'm seeing developmental-wise within the TIDs. It's almost $100 less than that the year before, which would coincide with what we've seen up in, was it TID of the Holy Hill District areas, where we're seeing most of that, which obviously is significant impact to those valuations of properties internally to the TID there.
Well, if you'd like to send me that, I'd be happy to take a look at it. But I'm not going to be able to respond to that this evening.
Okay. We can send that over. I can send you the
Okay.
3 years. If you scroll up, I just want to. So this is what we're talking about. What Crackwell's talking about as far as the tax levy. The entire village of German. This map is in Germantown. Use it as an example. Creates this tax levy. The 38.7 million value in the TID is excluded from it, and then the external of the village is on the hook for that. So you're saying you
See,
alter that levy at that point?
and that is the case as I'm looking at the top of the screen here. It says because the TID is used to set the tax levy, property in the tax should be included in the tax rate formula. And the village does not include TID in our net new construction numbers when we set our budget.
Okay, can you scroll down again? So this top rate is what it would be, that 3447.87. If, that's what it currently is, this is the math, these are the numbers I pulled.
Okay,
If I exclude the TID, right, on the initial levy, the bottom number, 5950, is what we get. That's where I'm having a hard, these are live numbers I'm using from the villages reporting to the state.
okay. I would have to take a look at these numbers.
So my concern on that is when the discussion's being had,
Mhm.
that there's no cost to the village up front. That's true, and on the back end, there's a little money going out that we don't realize, right? Because there's other investment coming back, or other revenue coming back in. But in the meantime, that's what the taxpayers are on the hook for. And that's an average mean house, 425,000.
If you send me that, I will check the numbers.
Okay, we can send it over. This is the information when I start looking into some of these things, and I'm trying to figure out the totality of the discussion, which was kind of lacking on the first. This helps the citizen understand the impact. I think it does.
If the numbers-
We can send it over, I can send you over.
I would appreciate that.
Perfect.
It's always helpful to be able to take a look at numbers before you're asked to comment on them.
If the comment is that you calculate it without that, right? But I'm showing you the numbers with it.
I haven't seen
that's
these
my
numbers
concern.
until you put them up on the screen. I came here tonight, I gave all of my numbers in advance and shared everything. And I think if you want to have good communication between the village and the school district, I think that's the appropriate way to handle this.
I would love to.
Okay.
I think this board would love to.
Yeah, I would have really appreciated to see that before I was asked to comment on it in a public meeting.
I could understand that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
I actually have one. The numbers are the numbers. You know, we've done the math here in Germantown for the land, the expansion, et cetera. Cork has done probably the same sort of thing with the buying of land. I'm assuming it's going to be roughly similar. So buying of land, building out, expanding. But you mentioned something that caught my ear with regards to, in theory, they could still do some of their own development to build the facilities to store the chemicals. Numbers are numbers, but what we're dealing with, and this isn't a U.S. state to U.S. state comparison, this is a U.S. versus, I believe Ireland is part of the EU, but even at that, different country. Like I said, I don't know if you're gonna be able to answer this question, but this is one that popped into mind. How was the idea, how available are these chemicals in Ireland or the EU versus the US? Is there cost involved if they don't do the development here and they do it in Ireland? How does that impact the import of these chemicals if they're not readily available? I know the EU can be very strict with what they import. It's those type of things, because obviously if we just simply take buying property and building out the structures and putting the people in, those are easy numbers to calculate. But for instance, if this is a worldwide chemical, there really is no issues, then obviously it's the cost there versus the cost here. But if this is a chemical that's produced in the US that they bring in here in Germantown and use, there's a cost there. But what's the cost in totality of if it's not as readily available, if there's import taxes, other fees that the EU may charge? Because that's, when you're dealing with that sort of thing and the transport of it from here to there or from wherever to there, that's not being reflected at all in this. And so believe me, I understand the internal competition country. I've experienced it myself, but it's from a more intellectual standard rather than physical or chemical. So that would be my takeaway from this is, certainly not that I don't believe Cork and Germantown are competing internally and they're looking at these numbers going, where can we get the most benefits and incentives? But I think there's, in this specific case with the idea of chemicals, I think that adds something that is not reflected at all in these numbers. as far as, you know, okay, Quark, you're trying to draw them over with a little bit more incentive. Go ahead and do the math on the chemicals. They may be still better off from a company perspective to do the work here without the incentives.
You know, first of all, I'm not an expert in the pharmaceutical industry, but from the information that that village staff went through with Sterling Pharmaceutical and Economic Development in Washington County went through with Sterling Pharmaceutical, the biggest cost drivers for what they're producing, for the pharmaceuticals they're producing, are labor and facilities. So, for example, you know, the expansion that's taking place here, it's not changing the footprint of the building at all, but the tanks, the vats that this production process takes place in are made out of a very expensive and special metal alloy that has to be extremely non-reactive, so that when they're making the medicine, you know, in these vats, that there's no opportunity for contamination from the production facilities. So I think that's that's a major cost factor, and the labor is the other major cost factor. While chemicals certainly are cost, and I don't know where they're produced, but I don't believe that that's as significant. It's not like, I'm trying to think of a parallel, you know, even producing lithium batteries where you gotta have a source of the right minerals that are available. I think it's the facilities and the labor which are really driving the cost.
I have a quick question. So you have to connect to a TID, correct?
Mhm.
That's why you're including
Mhm.
361, 976.
Yep.
And then possibly the square, which is 254, 975. Currently, they're on the levy, right?
Yes.
Those two companies or whoever's
Yep.
there. When they're included in the TID, if the expansion happens to be able to get up to the top one,
Mhm.
what's the benefit to them?
To them, there's no benefit, no
They
change to them.
continue to pay taxes,
Yep.
they continue to do everything. So do you just say, now you're part of a TID? Or,
Well, I mean, there really isn't any impact on them. There would be notification, but generally, they're not particularly interested.
It was brought up earlier, how many times can a TID be amended? That number is 4, just for the record.
and is it for the span of the TID or every so many years?
A municipality may complete a territory amendment change to a TID boundaries up to 4 times during the TID's life.
Okay.
This is the same information that was presented to the board,
Correct.
the village board. I was there that night, and a trustee asked a question about how does 103 jobs times 52,000 come up to 9.8 million? Can you elaborate that? Because this math doesn't math.
Okay. Well, I believe that the 52 jobs is only relates to the new jobs that are being added. I believe, if I remember correctly, that Economic Development, Washington County was looking at the overall payroll of Sterling Pharma.
All right. It seems misleading then to have that 9.8 million figure on here. If you're talking about 103 new jobs, and then you say 9.8 million payroll, someone's gonna think that you're adding 9.8 million in payroll with this TID when it's actually 5.3.
It's not my document.
I understand. I think it would be clearer to anyone reading this if you had that changed.
And I know it's not your document. The 103 jobs,
Mhm.
they're not stating that they're gonna be 103 Germantown jobs. They're just 103 jobs in the whole company. So there could be a new manager in wherever they're,
That would be a question for EDWC, but I believe that 103 is in Germantown. And when EDWC does a loan, provides a loan, it is tied to job creation at the facility. So it's not jobs someplace else, it's jobs here, and that's why I would believe that this 103 jobs would be in Germantown.
I mean, if they're anticipating spin-off jobs, like if they think a shopping mall is gonna get developed right next door to it, and you're gonna have 85 additional jobs from that, okay, then I can see the 9.8 million, but it's just, like I said, the math doesn't math.
You may want to invite Christian Cheshlock to come to a meeting and address those questions to him.
Okay. And then my last comment goes back to something you mentioned. You brought up that the village attorney reviewed the EDWC board members. Even though they don't legally see a conflict of interest, publicly, I think there absolutely is a conflict of interest that you have the EDWC giving $1 million forgivable loan. Here's a check for $1 million, keep it, to a company that's represented by a member of their executive board and their board of directors. That I don't see how that's not a conflict of interest. And I don't expect you to have a response, because I know you're a village attorney.
I didn't hear a question.
Yes, there wasn't one, I'm just making a statement.
Okay.
Yeah, to Tom's point, this is, I mean, you're here as the representative of the village. This isn't directed at you. You
Right, I
actually
understand.
you weren't there that night.
Yeah,
I didn't receive your numbers till today.
okay.
We're all busy people, but this is just something I came up with as far as doing my research. As an investigator for 20 years, I kind of do the totality of the investigation to the best of my ability. I did a lot of learning in this. You provided a lot of insight tonight
Yeah.
into the thought process. I think the initial discussion, you were very forthcoming about some of the things that were going on. I think we just want more clarification around some of the stuff we're hearing within the village as far as either misunderstanding of information, misinformation, however we want to classify all of that we get hit with as board members and your board gets hit with. I know I've been on the phone with some of your board members. Hey, what's going on with this? What's the story? Can you fill me in? Can you help us understand this? The fact is we have a TID,
Yeah.
right? And how do we make it?
Yeah.
I fundamentally, I'm on the record, I disagree with that style of management, but I'm not the only person that gets a vote in that, right? So then what do we do to financially make it as successful for the village as possible? That's the other question. And maybe if I'm in a different seat, I look at it for potential, come to a different conclusion or answer. When I see these kind of numbers and we say that, and I have taxpayers asking me, what's this whole TID thing about? What does it mean to me? Well, I can't answer them. The TID pays X percentage of a $1 million forgivable loan, right? And they don't understand. What they do understand is my tax bill higher or lower? And that's the blunt question we get, right? How did this affect my dollars in a time of record inflation with all the other stresses going on in a household?
Right.
That's what we're dealing with. So I understand some of the frustration there. These are the things we work out throughout an I look at it as an investigation, any question that's asked of me, and we come kind of through with some of the information. If I'm wrong on that, I would love to be wrong on that, but.
And I don't mind answering questions or looking at things. I just need to take a look at it and have a little bit of time to work through it. And
Sure.
happy to, talk with you after I get a chance to take a look at that. I'm happy to come back to another meeting if you'd like. Actually, and if there is more interest in having conversations about tax increment districts and all that, I'd be happy to invite Ehlers to a meeting to talk a little bit more about it. They can speak with more expertise on the topic than I can. When it comes to some of the questions on, the economics, I'm sure that Christian Cheshlock from Economic Development in Washington County would be happy to come to a meeting. And I think all of us who work on this, and we understand the frustration. There's a lot of misinformation, really on both sides of the TID issue. There's oftentimes when I read things or people send me articles, there's a lot of generalizations, that get made that are sometimes true but not always true. So I think having that dialogue would be helpful, and I'm happy to participate in it. And I apologize if I seem frustrated but
Fully understand.
yeah.
Like I said, you're the agent, you're the person in front of us.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I don't know if Dean would want to come down and explain some of this maybe. I've been trying to get that to work out, but we'll see. We'll keep plugging away at that
Yep,
relationship.
yep.
So,
Since we're getting deep in the weeds, I thought I'd ask, is there any studies that are done on the impact of having the TID district? So, meaning, we're increasing jobs, hopefully that brings in more revenue to the community, that helps our businesses. Is there any study on how that affects us? I mean, does that increase tax revenues throughout the districts? Are we gonna build more houses? You know, all of those things kind of play into this. Is that part of what we're looking at when we create this type of a TID district? But I guess the concern that we have as a board, as a school district, is you bring in more employees, you potentially bring in more students, that could tax us as far as space and not necessarily getting the immediate revenue of having more students, and we're busting at the seams. And there isn't a good way for us to get more money to build a school without going to the taxpayers once again and say, hey, we need to build a new school because we have, 50 new kids coming in next year. And we don't get the tax revenue for possibly 20 years coming in. That's kind of the gist of what the problem is. So is there any study that's being done with this to show that we're gonna increase tax revenues, our businesses are gonna be giving the city more money, all of those things along with it?
From an academic perspective, there have been a lot of generalized studies with I haven't looked at these in actually many years now, but there have been like more generalized studies about that of tax increment districts in not only Wisconsin but other states and how they're utilized and what those economic impacts are. There hasn't been anything done like on a local level looking at that. I would say that one of the policies that the village board is following, it's really not a policy, it's not something that's adopted, but one of the ad hoc or unofficial policies is that they have not in the past used tax increment district funding for residential development. And I think, to a great extent because of what you've just mentioned, that the acknowledgement that residential development comes with people and families come with kids, and there is more of an expense from that perspective. And I wouldn't say that that's something there may be something come up in the future that the village board may take a different approach on it, and I think that would be a conversation that the school board and the village board would want to have at that time. But generally what we're seeing, anecdotally, is that these most of the businesses that are coming in now have a relatively small number of employees. There's a great deal of automation. There's a high amount of value, but a relatively low number of employees. So, for example, with the building that originally went up as Briggs and Stratton, that big warehouse, 700,000 square foot warehouse up on Holy Hill Road, has about 40 employees in it, spread over 3 shifts. They have robotic distribution robots in place that are picking up pallets and bringing them in trucks, and it's a relatively low number of people that are working there. Some of the other businesses, Dielectric, for example, Golden Pet, do have a higher number of employees, but generally we're seeing fewer people involved and much more machinery and equipment and facilities. I will also say that we have had conversations with staff about housing development. I mean, whether it's in a TID or not, I think that has impacts on the school district. And I know that one of the things, I think we've had a little issue with logistics, but we are trying to get somebody from the school district to start being a part of plan commission meetings because of that. And I think that's an important conversation to have, that when residential development comes, is it going to how is it going to affect the school districts, and how can the village help to minimize that impact?
Yeah, and I think the problem there is density. If we're going to be building 5,000 unit apartment complexes, that's different than single family homes. So that would be our concern.
Well, and kind of to pile on with that, like it says the 52,000 is an average annual salary. So when you take an average annual salary and you're adding 103 people, you could have a broad, you know, you had 10 people coming in making, you know, 200,000. Then you have a whole bunch of minimum wage jobs, which it kind of would be nice to see the rundown of what those 103 jobs looks like as far as the salaries. Because if you're bringing in a bunch of minimum wage jobs that now can't afford to live in the district, now that affects what kind of housing you're going to have to build in the district in order to be able to accommodate, you know, a whole workforce that isn't making, you know, either 52,000, which is, you know, it sounds good, except for when we see what the cost of living is now. That isn't actually very, what would be the word? It's not necessarily livable in a community when you're looking at maybe $1,500 a month just rent now, not much less buying a home. So it'd just be interesting to see what the breakdown of what they're looking at as far as adding employees.
That is something, I don't have that with me, and I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I know Economic Development in Washington County, as part of their analysis, did look at the distribution, and that is something that, you know, again, if you'd like, whether it's on this or more general topics, I'm sure they would, you know, be more than willing to come and get into a more detailed presentation on that.
It's just the type of jobs matter.
Yeah.
Versus just saying we just got, 103 jobs.
Yeah.
I appreciate you bringing up the planning commission seat. President Walter and I have had some conversations back and forth dating back to June on that. You know, there's an application in. It sounds like Ms. Ott, the clerk, has got things rolling.
Yeah.
We're waiting to hear back on that. In similar fashion, we've offered a seat on our Buildings and Grounds Committee.
Okay.
We do have capital improvement stuff that's going on. We have an RFP out to.
Long-range facility.
That came in now?
It came in, we are reviewing it on Monday.
It sounds like we'll talk about that next month. We're hoping to get an actual village board member into that seat to help facilitate that conversation. Realistically, the conversation is the last thing we want to do is invest in Amy Bell and find out all the housing goes up to Rockfield. That would be the nightmare situation, right? So that's the point of increasing this communication and dialogue firsthand. And if we can get a member from each board in each direction, I think we can only exponentially build that relationship.
I think that would be very helpful, because it doesn't do anybody any good to have proposals come forward and then, you know, find out later that there's issues with them. And it you know, developers don't like that either. They don't want to come forward and say, hey, we're planning a development here, and invest time and money into putting together a proposal, and then find out, well, hey, there's not enough room in the school that's served by this area. So yeah, I think I agree 100%. I think that communication would be helpful to everybody.
Fantastic. We'll work on both ends of the candle on that.
All right.
Meet in the middle at some point here.
All right, that sounds good.
I've got one more. Promise it'll be quick. Can a TID be structured in such a way that the school district portion of improvements can be pulled out immediately while the remainder stays in there to help fund the TID infrastructure?
I don't believe that it can be structured that way. The reason that I'm hesitating is if, you know, what might be possible under some conditions would be if we were, for example, if there was a housing component in a future TID at some point, maybe there could be in a development agreement something worked out to provide some sort of financial support for the school district, or some sort of a contribution. But I think, to strictly answer your question, I don't believe that the TID itself can be structured that way.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming in. I know it was a little bit of fodder in your direction. We appreciate it.
You know, I'm always happy to answer questions, and I really do believe in the communication and trying to improve that. And you know, anytime that you would like me to come in and give an update, even if it's not related to a specific amendment, I'm happy to do that.
Fantastic. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Well, that's item 3. Does anybody need a break in there? I know I had to escape for one. I apologize for that. Does anyone want a break, like very quickly here, or want to keep going? Everyone's good? All right. For citizen comment, I have one. It's going to be Scott Heffley. I can read this long paragraph if you'd like me to. I think you understand the process. 3 minutes. Please don't disparage anybody directly in the room. And we appreciate you coming. It's been a while. Yeah.
Just talk. You don't have to lean forward.
Good, okay. Scott Heffley, W159 and 10514 Old Farm Road, Germantown. So I want to thank you guys for restructuring so I can come to your meetings, and I saw some of you board members came to the village board meeting where I spend most of my free time. So I appreciate the fact that that came to fruition after years of people bringing it up, and I knew you had to restructure things to do that, so thank you for that, because you talk about communication, you gotta be able to come and see what's going on, and they come to see what's going on, so, and I've seen you there, you guys there, so, I appreciate that. I can't sit here and answer questions about TIDS, I'd sure love to, because I'm not on the agenda, but, I have a concern about us. We seem to be really pushing hard with TIDS, and it's faster than the growth rate would say that we should. I have a big issue with that. I'm a financial guy like Mr. Brown, same industry. I've been studying economics and all this stuff for years, and it just, you can do whatever you want to. You can do whatever TIDS you want to, but in the end, the school district is the one that has to wait for their money. And our costs and your costs go up every single year dramatically, and your labor costs go up. And you just can't go out and borrow money like the village can. They can borrow money all day long, and you guys can't do that. So that's why I'm a little sensitive when it comes to TIDS. I think they're a tool, yes, but they are being way overused in this village, and I will stick to that until someone proves me wrong. And if there is one for residential, be very wary of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 5, consent agenda. It'll be 5A, approval of June 10th, 2024 meeting minutes. B, approval of July 1st, 24 meeting minutes, open session only. C, approval of teacher resignations. D, approval of teacher contracts. E, approval of donations. Do we have anything in there we'd like to pull out and have a separate conversation?
I'd recommend a motion to approve consent and then second,
Sorry,
and then a full
yes.
discussion on specific items if
Yeah.
needed.
Make a motion to approve consent agenda items A through E.
Second.
Mr. Barney with the motion and Mr. Pollock with the second. Any discussion?
I'm happy to publicly note the, I think use the word multiple times, exponential donations we have this evening.
Please do.
The following donations this month are Big Sky Country, $1,000 to the Germantown High School Palms team, Cousin Subs, $1,000 to Germantown High School Palms, MGS Manufacturing, $1,000 to High School Palms, and Chevelle Smith Bell Salon, $500 to the High School Palms team, Westbury Bank, $250 to the Girls Swim and Dive, Andy Burrell, $500 to Germantown Girls Swim and Dive, Jack C. Moss Trucking Incorporated, $1,000 to Girls Swim and Dive, Gel Food and Beverage, $500 to Girls Swim and Dive, NY2LA Sports, $500 to High School Athletics, 3-2 Baseball Booster Club, $1,880.18 for screens, hitting mats, and coaches gear to the high school baseball program, 3-2 Booster Club, $7,500 towards new high school boys dugouts on the varsity field. Fleet Farm gave us 2,000 bottles of water. Soccer World of Brookfield, $500 to the boys soccer team. Affiliated Dermatologist, $500 to the high school boys soccer team. Wendland Nursery, $500 to the high school boys soccer team. Chronology Center, $250 to the high school boys soccer. There was an anonymous donor of $1,000 to the high school boys soccer team. MGS MFG Group Incorporated, $1,000 to Germantown High School Boys Soccer, and Pet Supplies plus $750 to Germantown High School Boys Soccer.
That's outstanding.
Fantastic. Soccer gave it a run, but I would not mess with Palms and Swim and Dive. They are.
Baseball's coming on strong. So,
Man, it's amazing some of the ability of their fundraising. That's fantastic. So we appreciate that greatly. I guess I'd like to touch on resignations and contracts. I didn't get to attend that personnel meeting. Net in, out, if you can just kind of cover the.
I'll explain it this way. Resignations at the point of the personnel meeting, we had 3 resignations. There's 1 new one since. There are 2 of those resignations. Copied the liquidated damages clause below. 2 of those resignations are in that window of needing to pay liquidated damages. To this point, we haven't received those payments, to my knowledge. And therefore, I would recommend approving them pending the payment of liquidated damages.
Okay.
Yeah. And then relative to contracts, I have to flip over.
It's a busy time for your office, correct?
Yeah, it is,
Isn't it
yeah.
July through August?
There are 13 contracts. I believe at the point of the personnel committee meeting, I think we had 11 that came forward. They're for a variety of reasons. Some of them were discussed at personnel relative to for example, in one case, it's an employee that's been in our district that's simply changed work groups from professional technical to teaching force. We felt that was an appropriate move. Some are due to vacant positions that we filled. We feel very good about the teachers that we're bringing in. Our principals are working very hard to find quality candidates that will be a good fit and get the opportunity to meet with them.
One thing I noticed is most are not base pay, which would indicate to me prior experience.
That is accurate.
That's
Yep.
always a good thing to see.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's
Mr. Nowak had discussed making a change in the motion pending liquidated
Yep,
damages.
I got it.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
get
Yeah.
that.
I just want to make sure we didn't move forward.
Yeah.
And I think that's appropriate to do, make that clarification, right?
Before I cut you off, do you have anything else on that? No? I appreciate not seeing too many base in there. Not that new people to the business aren't bad, but it's nice to get that experience coming in. I think that says something about the district as an attractive place for experienced personnel to come, so. Thank you. Let's work on that.
I will make a motion to amend the original motion to state that teacher resignations are only approved once liquidated damages are paid, if applicable.
I'll second it.
Mr. Barney with the amended motion, Mr. Pollock with the second. Any discussion? Everybody's good with that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion or the amendment passes, and we'll return back to the initial motion, or what is the amended motion, right? Any further discussion before we take action here on the agenda? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that also passes. Consent agenda. Thank you for walking us through that. Policy committee, we have Mr. Barney.
Yes, policy committee met on June 24th. The first new business item that we discussed was a proposed new policy, supplementary instructional materials. This was brought to committee only for discussion to develop expectations and processes regarding the use, approval, publication of supplementary instructional materials. So no action was taken at that June 24th meeting, but I expect it to come back to our next committee meeting. The bulk of the meeting was around a batch of updates from Neola, 22 revisions and 1 new policy. I'll give you a couple updates or highlights. The conflict of interest policy was updated to show that board members can serve as voluntary bus drivers. The clerk policy was revised to clarify the duties of the clerk based on changes in state law. Not to be confused with the human growth and development policy, the health education policy is being updated to clarify parental rights when it comes to opting students out of specific health instruction. Employee leaves policy is being revised based on developments in federal law regarding employee pay during a covered military leave. The student anti-harassment policy is being revised to clarify that harassment allegations can apply to a group of students, not only to individuals. The suspension and expulsion policy was revised to reflect that the term principal may also include associate or assistant principals. Let's see, the facility security policy was revised to clarify the definition of metal detectors to include handheld wands. Surprised that wouldn't have already been included. And it also has a change to allow school event supervisors to be the person that can respond to school safety situations when there is not an administrator present at the event. And the last one I'll highlight for you, the school resource officer program policy is being revised to clearly state that the SROs are not empowered to discipline students from a school perspective. That power remains the responsibility of district personnel. So given that background, Policy Committee brings forward a motion with a positive recommendation to approve the updates, modifications, and edits as discussed to district policies 0100 through 9800.01.
That motion comes forward with a positive recommendation, does not need a second. Any discussion? Sounds good. No, I would note, just so anyone's watching, I attended that committee meeting, and there's lengthy discussions that go around some of this policy. It does seem like we handle it pretty quick with a very high-level overview of it here, but it was talked through in rather detailed, granular detail, so appreciate you continuing to lead that effort as I know batches come through.
Yep, we've got another batch right around the corner.
It's in the oven.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes.
That is all from Policy Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Barney. Personnel Committee, item 7. Item 7, Personnel Committee.
Personnel Committee did meet on July 15th. All the committee members were present, along with other board members that took time out of their days to join us for the participation part of it, or the discussion part of it. It's not expected, but always appreciated. The first matter of business, Mr. Nowak took care of when walking through teacher contracts, resignations, retirements, and gave us a staffing update. The next item of business was the employee handbooks. Those are updated throughout the year. Those are a living document that, as changes are required, we will update them as we go along. So on the 15th, we were simply getting the employee handbooks ready for the new school year and making sure that everything we talked about the previous year was in there. The committee did take a look at it. We made sure that everything was in good order, and we did come forward with a motion, a recommendation on that. The third order of business was building substitutes, which.
Do we wanna handle
What, do you want
that?
to do the motion right away?
It's up to you, I suppose. It's your update. That'll be item B of
Let's do
7. B7, approval of employee handbooks. If you wanna give me that motion, positive recommendation.
Motion with positive recommendation from Personnel Committee to the full board of approval of modification to all employee handbooks as presented.
That motion comes forward with a positive recommendation, does not need a second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes. Thank you.
And then the third item of business was building substitutes. This was a conversation whose genesis was probably about a year ago. Since we talked about it, we implemented 4 building substitutes across 6 schools. And how that played out was the 2 elementary schools each shared a building substitute. So after looking at the numbers, looking at financially and looking at it from a practicality standpoint, Mike talked us through some of the positive attributes that we've seen. And Dr. Reuter shared with us what a morning of an administrator looks like when they find out just how many people are not showing up for work that day. So taking a look at having on-site building substitutes, we're looking at increasing the number from 4 to putting 1 at each school. And again, if you go back and review the live feed from it, there was lengthy discussion about that. So that also comes forward with a positive recommendation, motion to positive recommendation from the Personnel Committee to the full board to approve the hiring of 6 building substitutes, that's 2 additional ones, through Teachers on Call with a daily rate of $160 per day for the school year 2024 through 2025, period.
That motion comes forward with a positive recommendation of the full board. Does not need a second. Any discussion?
Yes. In the interest of transparency, my wife has served as a building sub in the past and may serve in the future, so I will be abstaining from this vote.
Thank you. Appreciate that greatly. I did get I didn't get to attend this meeting, unfortunately. I was apparently ordered to go on vacation. Apparently you need one of those. However, I did get to watch it. There was some lengthy discussion around most of these topics, and the building substitute one was a difficult one over the last year to fill. I do think breaking it down to making that commitment to 1 building for each one of these may entice the fill rate a little better, as opposed to, I don't know if I'm going to building A or B. So I think that'll help with that. In the end, we did have them, I believe, full, and we saw a positive experience with the consistency of the person within the same building. So I can't see why we wouldn't want to continue to tackle this approach.
Do we have the flexibility to move those subs around? If, say, there's a flu bug at one school, we could flex them into that
Yeah.
building?
Yep. And to clarify, they're not our employees. They are employees of Teachers on Call, but they are kind of designated to an initial building. Ultimately, if we need that service at a different one, I think that's an option.
So we're just starting with the 6 every day we want.
Yes, yeah, and I think for those building administrators that have to fill in those positions, they have a go-to. It's familiar to the kids. I can only see that being obviously a benefit. And then they move on to if there's other fills that need to occur. So, am I missing anything?
I just want to clarify, it's quite often the administrative assistants that are putting in a lot of time filling those spots.
Or early morning hours
Yes,
too, because it's
yes,
not.
yeah.
So if they at least have one go-to.
Yeah.
And the fill rates have actually been well, from what I've seen, compared to
That's
the rise in need we've been able
They
to.
have improved, but it's an ongoing discussion that we'll continue to look at.
Sure. Any further discussion around that? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none?
I will abstain.
One abstention, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Pollock. That passes. 8, new business. A discussion and action approval iPad purchase. Mr. Crawford.
Hi. I'm bringing forward iPads, so 70 replacement iPads that are going to replace 5th gen and older that we have. So we're talking about 8-year-old iPads. They're no longer supported. We can't update them with iOS anymore. So it's just a rollout to get rid of some of the old devices. And with this plan, I plan on reselling all the old ones, so we'll get some money back too. So I'm just waiting for a couple quotes on the resale value to try to get the best bang for a buck. So
Sure. Fantastic.
and these are spread out between all the schools, so it's a couple classes. I know there's 2 at Kennedy, 1 group at Amy Bell that has it. It's just whatever group was the oldest is going out.
This is a $20,580 purchase. This did not go in front of finance yet?
It did not go in front of finance.
Is our business administrator have anything to weigh in on?
So when I decided not to have a finance committee,
Yeah.
it was brought to me after the fact. So we just decided to be able to move forward and be ready for the school year, that we were going to
I'm ultimately just asking, you're giving the blessing, we can afford it.
Yes.
Perfect.
It's in the technology budget.
Yeah, no, thank you. I can hear a motion on that unless there was,
Make a motion to approve the purchase of Apple iPads from Apple Incorporated for a total of $20,580 and charged to the appropriate technology account.
Second.
Mr. Barney with the motion, Mr. Polk with the second. Any discussion?
When you say resale value, are we looking at selling them back to a company, or are we offering them to students?
They go back to a company, so, it's, cause they clean them and then we wipe them and they're empty, there's nothing on them. But the reseller, just to get, cause they're so old that I wouldn't feel comfortable giving it to a student and then they can use it for a couple months and then they can't update it either.
Right.
So it goes to like a recycling program that, the one that we chose last year, Total Technology, they actually gave it to like, underserved, schools. So that was a nice use, so they got reused still, but a different way, so.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes. B, discussion action approval of academic standards. Mr. Jake Piziak. Welcome.
Good evening. Annually, we are required by the state of Wisconsin to provide a notice of the academic standards that will be used in our classroom throughout the school year. We have to post annually the standards that we will use in mathematics, science, reading and writing, geography, and history. And then in addition to that, on an annual basis, we have to provide a parent notice of those academic standards at the beginning of the school term, which is here in July. The state statute also states that the district may provide an electronic notice, or we can provide that notice electronically, including the posting of the standards, which we had discussed last year, so that once parents go in there, what you're going to see is you're going to see section 3 of the Wisconsin State Academic Standards for the areas that I had identified.
Similar to years past?
That's
last
exactly how it was last
2
year.
years? Any major changes to any of the core?
In all of the areas that I just identified, there were not any changes that occurred to math, science, reading, writing, geography, or history. The areas that will come to teaching and learning in the August meeting, we'll discuss areas that are under a curriculum review. So one of the reasons why we go to a curriculum review is because the standards have changed. So we bring a committee of teachers together to review those standards and review what we're currently using in the classroom to see the match between the academic standards that the state has and the curriculum that we're using in the classroom. So those we'll bring to your attention that way. The areas that will be in curriculum review this year, we have tech ed and family and consumer science will likely have new standards by the time that they're adopted. In the spring of this year, we're likely to see new science standards be published, but when they're published, they're coming out in the spring, so that's not going to change actually what's happening in the classrooms at that point in time. So the board will become aware of what standards have been updated through the curriculum review process and teaching and learning.
And to say, I think we recycled our timeline for reviews to kind of sync with the state standard.
Correct, so that will be provided in August in terms of the review cycle that we'll use. All of the review cycles have been kind of pushed slightly. I think that was due to the legislation around Act 20 and DPI recognizing the lift that districts have undergone to support reading implementation.
Sure. With that, I'll hear a motion unless there's anything else we need to hear. It's a lengthy one.
It's a lengthy one. It starts with I move.
He's good.
I move to approve the proposed notice of the student academic standards that are in effect for the 2024-2025 school year. As said, proposed notice was presented to the board in written form with a date of July 22nd, 2024 in the board's packet of supplemental materials for this meeting, all pursuant to section 120.1213B and section 118.31GA of the state statutes. And I move that the board direct the administration to provide parents and guardians of the Germantown School District with notice of the board-adopted student academic standards that are in effect for the 2024-2025 school year on the school district's website.
Second.
Mr. Pollock with the motion, thank you, and Ms. Higginbotham with the second. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes. C, discussion and action to add additional sections to GSD Elementary Schools. Dr. Chris Reuter and Mr. Jake Miziani.
Thank you. We monitor weekly our enrollment from about January on. In the spring, I believe it was April, Mr. Nowak brought a preliminary staffing report based on the enrollment at that time. Our sections have stayed steady on the elementary, middle, and high school level, with the exception of 4-year-old kindergarten, 5-year-old kindergarten. We have an influx of kids that have enrolled in the 4-year-old kindergarten program across all 3 of our buildings, or all 4 of our elementary buildings since that original report, and we've been watching those numbers climb. And instead of coming month to month with, hey, we need to add a section here and there, we know that the month of July, things start to flatline as parents go to Target and see these signs up to buy stuff, and they go, wait, I have a 4-year-old that's going to kindergarten, and check this out, or they're coming from a private entity for a 4-year-old kindergarten into 5K. They've never enrolled their child before. So with the new distribution of students across the 4 elementaries tonight, we're proposing 4 additional 4K sections and 2 5-year-old sections at MacArthur and Rockfield combined. We, just so the board's aware, there's a possibility we might come to you in August again regarding class size increasing. We're monitoring a few elementary grade levels at the lower elementary 1st grade specifically that still sit in the desired range of our class size policy. They might be up 1 student, but at this time administration's not recommending an expansion because that would then make extremely small class sizes, but we'll monitor if we get an influx at any of those grade levels and communicate that with the board to look at possible expansion in one specific school.
Sure.
But every Tuesday, Jake's administrative assistant pulls an enrollment report, which then he provides that report to Mike, Katie, Brittany, and myself, and then Brittany looks at total enrollment, revenue to it. Katie and Jake provide feedback given around teaching and learning, and Mike, obviously the staffing aspect, and then we communicate with principals around next steps, and that led to this evening for the full board.
How many, is this gonna be an addition of staff then, correct?
With 4-year-old kindergarten, I believe it's keeping some of our FTE whole that may have been part-time because there was only a morning or an AM
So
section.
not a new name, just extension of hours.
And I believe Jake can speak to this a little bit more at a couple of the elementary specifically. I believe Rockfield and MacArthur, there might be change of teachers to different grade level positions, which you might see a higher at 3rd grade and go, wait, I didn't think we had a 3rd grade opening. Well, a teacher might move internally based on need. I don't know if you have more to.
No, absolutely.
Sure.
We had existing staff that were redistributed, so a kindergarten teacher is now in 1st grade. That'll likely be a kindergarten teacher again at Mac. So there won't be a 1-to-1 correlation between the positions that were here, but the total number of staff will all stay the same. You'll see 1 new 4K name pop up, and then 2 at Mac and Rock.
And those, when you think about those 4K positions, that's really a part-time teacher.
Yeah, they're
It's a
half day,
0.5.
yeah.
It's different than every other grade level.
Yeah. So in that scenario, you're probably, I guess, how does that play out? Does input from that staff member probably wants to remain kindergarten, but was willing to make the change to 1st?
Correct.
But now there's an ability to keep them at that K5.
Correct.
So we'll honor that and keep them where
The
they'd like to be.
staffing plan is fluid until the day the children walk in the building.
Sure. Yeah. I guess I'm getting to the
issues.
point of what's the conversation
Yeah.
with the staff
And
themselves. So I mean, because tis the time to be flexible, right? Until
Yeah.
the start of the school year, but.
Well, one thing with that level that we're talking about is certification becomes more significant. With elementary, you've got a lot of flexibility with grade levels, and we need to be very conscious of certification in these situations.
part of the conversation too with principals is projecting forward to next year too, so we're not constantly moving staff.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is not to move a staff member every year and play ping pong with them, obviously.
Especially at lower elementary, as this year they're all engaging in the new reading program. And then to learn something, another grade level the next year and then go back, or we want stability.
Yep. Any other questions? Any other information we need?
Make a motion to approve an additional section of 4-year-old kindergarten at Amy Bell, County Line, MacArthur, and Rockfield Elementary Schools, and an additional section of 5-year-old kindergarten at MacArthur and Rockfield Elementary Schools for the 2024 to 2025 school year.
Second.
Mr. Barney with the motion, Ms. Higginbotham with the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes. D, discussion action of 24-25 supplemental contract revisions. Ms. Kate Cole and Mr. Mike Nowak.
I'll speak to it briefly. This was presented in spring and needs to be brought back. When it was brought at that time, contract amounts that were used reflected the 23-24 school year as opposed to the 24-25 school year, which they should reflect. There's miscommunication in that regard. It's also unique in that I think this is the first time we've been in a position to set contracts with those correct contract amounts. So these numbers reflect the calendar year and amounts that they should be.
Yeah,
Anything that you wanna
these
add?
are some of our counselors, our school psychologists and social workers, and they have tasks that have to get completed to prepare for the upcoming school year. That includes staff training, specifically for some of our new teachers. They provide some training for that, so that's what the contract's for.
I will add too, I think in the spring we talked about this, but this is a continuation of the conversation. We've explored, Dr. Reuter and I and others have explored weaving these amounts into teacher contracts. Other districts do that. There are some implications relative to days and things like that, but it's something that would alleviate us needing to bring that to this group every year. Accurate?
Yeah, I guess I was made aware of this right after it happened. It was a little frustrating because we had a positive action to get these people their contracts right away, and unfortunately, we fell back on, well, this is what we always do. Missed the boat of getting it right the first time. So hopefully we don't have that. Next year might be a little different with the biannual budget, but ultimately the staff is getting the pay they deserve at the rate they're supposed to. That's why it's back on here, and for formality reasons it needs to be. Any further discussion on that? See none, I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve the 2024-2025 supplemental teacher contracts as presented.
Second.
Higginbotham with the motion, Mr. Medved with the second. Any final discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes. E, discussion action to approve 23-24 Fund 46 Capital Improvement Trust Deposit. Ms. Brittany Altendorf.
Absolutely. So back in 2013, the state passed Act 336. 336 allowed school districts to place funds into a trust that is used to purchase capital improvements in the future. So you can use the trust to basically save money for one large project, or just to put funds away for future capital improvements that the district plans for. The reason it is different than just allocating funds into fund balance is because it is showed as an expense the year you move it to the trust, not the year that it's actually purchased, whatever the capital expansion was. So instead of, for some reason, saving it in fund balance and then spending $1 million all in one year, it is part of your shared cost. So if you spend the $1 million in 1 year, your shared cost goes up, you get more state aid, less property taxes for 1 year, and then the next year it flips back around. So putting it in the trust annually, it continues to go towards your shared cost every year, and then the $1 million purchase or whatever it was in the 5 years later does not affect your aid at all. So school districts are allowed to do this. School districts that utilize this are usually negatively tertiary aided, which is our district, because then it reduces that negative aid and puts it into the secondary aid allocation, which will be beneficial for us. It's one of our strategies to get higher state aid and less property tax in our revenue. So in 2021, the board approved the district to be able to create this trust. To create the trust, you have to create the trust, deposit $1 to start the time clock, because you have to put money into it for a 5-year period. You can't spend out of it for a 5-year period once it's created. So you put that $1 in there to start the time clock. So we did that, and then at the end of the 22-23 school year, the board approved $150,000 to go into it. So we have deposited $150,000 and $1, excuse me, and then earn in over $7,000 in interest currently on that trust. You have to do this by July 31st of every year to be able to book it back to the previous school year. So in reality, this is going to be an expense showed in the 23-24 school year that's going to designate the funds into this trust. So we are asking the board to approve $300,000 to show as an expense in the 23-24 school year to put towards our future capital improvements.
Fantastic. Thanks for the explanation.
If I could share, our local district, a neighboring district, has an action item related to Fund 46 where they've had a mature account since about 2013. They're remodeling an entrance for safety reasons at their school, one of their elementary schools, and upgrading some outdoor athletic facilities by taking out of this where they've been building, so they don't have to incur that cost on their normal operational or capital budget or go to referendum for those things. So that's what we're trying to build the future for, as Brittany brought this forward this evening.
Yeah, it aids with the funding, but it also, as far as the future plan, gives us flexibility with monies those years when we can use this to supplement. So it's all strategic at that point. Any other discussion? Hear a motion?
Motion to approve the deposit of $300,000 into the Capital Improvement Trust Bank Account, Fund 46, for future district capital projects.
Second.
Mr. Pock with the motion, Ms. Higginbotham with the second. Any further discussion? Mr. Mebane.
I'd like to add that I was very much in favor of this when we first created it, and $300,000 is very good, and I appreciate the amount going up. So, good job. Much appreciated.
Yeah, I think, so what, 400,000 plus interest at this point?
450.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna make an impact. We'll see it in years. I know sometimes there's discussion around this kind of money that sits around and you have available money. People need to understand the strategic planning for future years and what we're up against, and some of the budgetary process that's gonna come forward could get pretty interesting here in the next couple of years. So
Sure.
This is only gonna put us in an advanced place where we see districts around us going to multi-million dollar referendums or operating after deficits and using fund balance to supplement year-over-year costs, which only gets them to zero faster, right? So thank you for that leadership in that regard, and we'll keep moving. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes. F, discussion action to approve overnight travel request, Germantown High School Palms, Dr. Chris Reuter.
So I think the consent agenda item and this agenda item are coming full circle here this evening.
Yeah.
The Germantown High School Poms will be competing against the dance teams in the Midwest. The competition is a qualifier for Disney Disney trip in February. The dates of the trips are August 8th through the 10th, 2024. And the competition is located in Schaumburg, Illinois. 17 students, 3 coaches, along with parents will attend the trip. Student fundraising, parents and or donations will pay for the trip. Lodging costs will be approximately $300 and will be covered by the Germantown High School Poms Activity Fund. So we're looking for a approval this evening for overnight travel for those 17 students, 3 coaches to Schaumburg, Illinois in August.
Anything else? Good.
I would ask Mr. Polk, is your child attending?
Yes.
So I would ask that you abstain from that.
That was the plan.
Okay, good. You're just so involved.
This board's on top of it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to set a record for the number of abstentions in meetings.
All for good cause.
Yes.
Any questions regarding that? I'm assuming not, but.
Actually, I do have a question.
Sure.
If it's 17 students and 3 coaches, how is lodging costs only $300?
They're all staying in one room.
Well,
Denied.
the student participants are, their parents are paying for,
You're paying for the coaches.
yeah. Well, it's-
Oh, so this is the coach's room.
So it's
That's
gonna
what's
cost
being-
$17.65 per family to put the 3 coaches up.
Correct. So you can speak to it, but it's usually two students, to a room in their 2 parent, like moms. So it's usually a mom thing. So one mom and their child, and then another mom and their child share a room, and they share the cost for their room. They're paying it for them separately. So I'm assuming the board is just approving one room for the coaches.
Correct, as well as the overnight travel.
Thank you.
That makes sense.
You know.
But yes, that was a good question.
Motion to approve the overnight travel request for 17 students and 3 coaches to travel to Schaumburg, Illinois from August 8th through 10th, 2024.
Second.
Mr. Barney with the motion, Ms. Higginbotham with the second. All in, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
We have 1 abstain.
I will abstain.
And any opposed? Hearing none, that passes. G, discussion action to approve teacher retirements, Mr. Nowak.
Thank you. Jeff Thilke submitted his retirement letter on June 14th, 2024. Jeff is requesting the board accept his decision to retire at the end of the 23-24 school year. Jeff has taught tech ed at Kennedy Middle School for the past 13 years. In addition, he also taught for 10 years at Brown Deer School District and 12 years at Howard's Grove School District. This retirement does not qualify for health insurance benefit for multiple reasons. One, because Mr. Thilke has not been in the district for the required 13 years. Additionally, he's at an age where the benefit does not apply. This is a recognition of his contributions to the district as a teacher.
Fantastic. Any questions? I'll hear a motion.
Make a motion to approve the request for retirement at the conclusion of the 23-24 school year for Jeff Thilke and thank him for his many years of service to our district. This retirement does not qualify for the health insurance retirement benefit.
Second.
Higginbotham with the motion, Mr. Barney with the second. Any discussion?
Just like to take a moment to thank Mr. Thilke for all the work that he's done, not only in the classroom, but also with trying to obtain recognition for his department in this district. I know there's probably at least a couple of us on this board who spent some time writing recommendations for all the various grants or awards that we've ultimately received. So I think he's spent a tremendous amount of time kind of working towards that recognition, and it's well deserved not only for him, but also for KMS and this district.
I concur. We will miss Mr. Thilke. He's a one-of-a-kind guy. He did a lot of great things in this district.
Yeah, the ownership that he took of the program and the ability he lent to the district is fantastic. He'll be missed, but we wish him all the best and well-deserved retirement. So, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes. Congratulations, Mr. Phillips. 9, closed session. Here, a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 119.851 sub 1 sub G to confer with board legal counsel who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the board with respect to litigation in which it may or is likely to become involved, a legal matter. 2, 1985 sub 1 sub C to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any employee. Item A, fall coaching contracts.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Pollock with the motion, Mr. Barney with the second. Any discussion? I would note we will most likely be returning into open session from this closed session. Dr. Ryder?
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So we will come back on live when we're done with those discussions and closed. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Ewert,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Barney's a yes, Medved,
Yes.
Pollock,
Yes.
Higginbotham.
Yes.
We are enclosed at 9:21 p.m. We are gonna reconvene into open session at 10:44 PM on July 22nd. Reconvene, so it'd be item 10, reconvene an open discussion and action if needed based on closed session business. Dr. Reuter.
Thank you. This evening, District Administration is recommending the following individuals for fall coaching contracts. I'll read those names to the board. Paulina Foyt, Jamie Carrolls, Robert Werner, Megan Foley, Jacob Davis, David Brzezinski, Michael Pfeiffer, Jonathan Davis, Scott Schubert, Andrew Waller, Corey McCabe, Jason Bauman, Robert Fliss, Sam Middlekowski, Shad Young, Stephanie Milmo, Taylor Wilch, Jenny Catalano, Maren Siegert, Christina Burmeister, Kelly Navin, Emily Getz, James A. Davis, Jake Sweehart, James Ulicki, Lori Bruss, Jace Brown, Mary Robbie, Kylie Komorowski, Lisa Stigler, Karen Wunschel, Brian Rushmer, Dixon Seymour, Kelly Swoop, Micah Durlam, Jacqueline Jessica, Kevin Hedinger, Tom Wilcox, Kyle Supernan, Christina Gagan, Benjamin Shu, Aaron Gaskell, and Kevin Breitzman.
Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the fall coaching contracts based on the names that Dr. Reuter presented.
Second.
Mr. Barney with the motion, Mr. Medved with the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes. Item 11, I'll take one final motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Ooh, Mr. Pollock with the motion. Mr. Medved, I'll give you the second. She had a whole bunch in there earlier. Meeting. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope, that passes. We are adjourned at 10:46 PM. Thank you for coming. Drive safe.